They erased this verse for a reason, not by time, not by accident, but by design. There was once a law that connected God, wealth, and human freedom, a truth so powerful, it could have freed you from every form of control, but someone decided it was too dangerous to keep. Since that day, humanity has been paying the price, in stress, in debt, in silence. They told you money was a blessing, but what if it became the new commandment? What if the system didn't just steal your wealth? It rewrote your faith, because if God's law about money was erased, you were never meant to prosper. In ancient translations, there was a law that spoke about balance, not sacrifice. It said money was never meant to rule man. It was meant to serve him. Wealth was not sin, and poverty was not holiness. It taught dominion, mastery over what you create instead of being mastered by it. But man twisted that message. The scribes softened the words. Preachers replaced wisdom with obedience. And slowly, the divine law that freed became a weapon of silence. They told the poor to be patient, the tired to be grateful, the faithful to wait for heaven, while the powerful built their own version of it on earth. They didn't just erase words, they burned pages. They turned ink into silence. As it is written in Proverbs 10:22, the blessing of the Lord brings wealth, and he adds no sorrow to it. But they even changed the meaning of blessing. They distorted the word wealth, and they made you believe that wanting more was betrayal, when in truth, it was part of your divine design. When men learned they could rule through fear, they no longer needed truth, only doctrine. That's when a new gospel was born, one that preached submission instead of wisdom, poverty instead of purpose, dependence instead of dominion. They called manipulation humility and control obedience. And you believed it. You worked harder. You prayed longer. You blamed yourself for not having what they never intended you to have. Every sermon promising next season kept you looking upward, while the powerful looked downward, counting your offerings. They didn't want your soul. They wanted your silence. And the moment you accepted that struggle was holy, you became manageable. That's when money stopped serving God and started replacing him. There's a man named Daniel. He's 42. He wakes up before sunrise, ties his old boots, and whispers, "God, just help me get through today." He doesn't ask for abundance, only survival, because he was taught that wanting more is pride, and that comfort offends heaven. 10 hours inside a factory, dust, noise, sweat. When the paycheck comes, it's already gone. Rent, bills, food. At night he kneels beside his bed and says, "Lord, I'm grateful for the little I have." But deep down, one question burns. If gratitude is the key, why do the locks keep multiplying? He believes patience will be rewarded, but only the waiting grows, not the reward. And that's when the invisible trade begins. Every time Daniel says, "If it's God's will," and does nothing, he trades authority for permission. Every time he doubts his power to create, he deposits faith into someone else's account. He was programmed to think obedience equals holiness, but it really meant permission to remain small. You see, the system loves believers like Daniel, faithful enough to hope, afraid to question, because a quiet believer keeps the machine alive. A tired believer funds the empire of fear. If you've ever felt like Daniel, hit like, not for me, for you, to prove you're waking up. Now let me ask you, are you living like Daniel? But one day, something inside you cracks. Not rebellion, exhaustion. You ask, if God owns the gold and silver, why does he want me poor? That question isn't pride. It's awakening. It's heaven whispering, you were never meant to serve fear in my name. You gave but never grew. You prayed but never prospered. You believed, yet felt chained. You saw churches overflow with gold while your fridge stayed empty. This wasn't faith being tested. It was control being perfected. And when you questioned it, they called you rebellious. When you stopped obeying out of fear, they called you lost. But you weren't lost. You were remembering. The poverty gospel was never divine. It was humanity's invention to keep obedience profitable. A guilty believer will never be free. God never asked you to shrink. He asked you to steward. He never cursed success. He cursed greed. And they are not the same. Every time you dreamed bigger, you felt dirty. Every time you invested in yourself, you felt selfish. But that fear wasn't from him. It was programming disguised as devotion. Now you stand at the edge of awareness. Your spirit knows something sacred was stolen. Not your faith, but your freedom to live it without shame. That's the true awakening. The moment you stop praying to escape reality and start using faith to transform it. The law they erased was never about accumulating. It was about governing. It was never about how much you had, but about what had you. It said, "Rule what you earn. Command what you create. Let no possession possess you." That was the balance between spirit and matter. Money was meant to serve the mission, not replace it. Forget the mission, and money becomes your master. Abundance isn't reward, it's responsibility. Energy that multiplies only when guided with awareness. When your inner world obeys purpose, your outer world obeys abundance. That's why they erased it, because a free mind can't be taxed. A conscious believer can't be controlled, and a person who rules money can't be ruled through it. As Jesus said in Luke 16:10, "Whoever is faithful in little will also be faithful in much." That verse wasn't about tithing. It was about power. Dominion begins in discipline. Wealth begins in awareness. God never hated prosperity. He hated idolatry. He never punished the rich. He punished the forgetful. The true law of divine finance isn't about hoarding blessings, but multiplying purpose. Abundance without direction becomes corruption. Abundance guided by light becomes creation. That's the law they erased, the one that would have broken every modern chain. Because if people saw money as energy under spiritual command, banks would lose power, governments would lose leverage, and fear would lose its currency. They told you to pray for provision instead of teaching you to govern it. But truth was never lost, only hidden. And now that you remember, the power isn't in their hands anymore. It's back in yours. Now that you know what was erased, you can't unknow it. Revelation brings responsibility. You stand before two altars, one built by fear, the other by freedom. If you keep serving fear, you'll repeat the same prayers, hoping for miracles that were never denied, only delayed by ignorance. You'll keep mistaking survival for purpose and call that struggle holy. But if you choose awareness, you break the agreement that made you poor in spirit. You see that God never wanted your suffering. He wanted your sovereignty. Every day you decide which law rules your life, the erased one or the eternal one. There's no neutrality between God and money. One frees you, the other buys you. And once you see that, your silence becomes rebellion. Your awareness becomes war. So before you close your eyes tonight, ask yourself, which altar did I serve today? Because every thought, every fear, every prayer is either building your cage or breaking it. Choose carefully before they erase it again. If this message spoke to you, subscribe, not for content, but for consciousness. Comment one word that proves you're awake, unerased, because the truth is back, and this time they can't delete it.